on the 11th hour. It's the time we're planning to start. So forgive me for my arrangements. I've not got the perfect setup here at the moment. Clearly I didn't get that set up properly, did I? Anyway, thank you for joining us. Hi, welcome to our celebration of the life and times of Queen Elizabeth. We normally run a live webinar every Wednesday for expats living and working abroad. But being a UK-based company, then obviously we felt that we wanted to pay respect to the life and times of Queen Elizabeth. For that and for the fact that the impact it has on our lives living and working abroad. So this is my personal take on her life and times, and thank you for that. And for me, it's a story of two great queens. In an age of, if we go back 100 years, the Queen had died at age 96, if we go back 100 years, it's a male-dominated society in theory. That has changed during Queen Elizabeth's reign, so that the oldest child now inherits the UK throne, whereas before it was always the oldest male child, and hence a younger brother would always take preference over an older sister. So the story of the two great queens starts with Queen Victoria. Or does it start with George III? It starts with George III. George III had 4 sons. The first 3 sons, 2 of them became king, but none of them had any direct descendants, not legitimate anyway. The 4th son did have a descendant, but he died very early in his life. And that descendant, Victoria, then became the queen by chance. She wasn't born to be queen. She'd got 3 uncles ahead of her father. It was only that there were no legitimate children born to them, and her father died, that she then became queen by chance and ruled for 63 years and set the tone for the British monarchy and the lifetimes of Queen Elizabeth in the 20th century. Queen Victoria lived in the 19th century. She lived to age 82, so she didn't die young. She didn't have a poor lifestyle. What she did is she survived long enough to live and be queen for 63 years, much the same as Queen Elizabeth has done. Queen Victoria's first heir was Edward VII, and he was, but he wasn't her firstborn child. Her oldest son, Albert Victoria, died. He died of flu or COVID, depending on what you call it, in 1892. So that, and as a result of that, or because of it, or because of the death of her husband Albert, for whatever reason, Queen Victoria is said to have not wanted ever King Albert to be King of England, named in respect, in remembrance of her husband. After and so by chance, because Edward VII's oldest son died, the Queen's grandfather became George V in 1911. So the Queen is not, his father would not have been king if it wasn't for that chance of Queen Victoria's son dying before he could become king. But then King George V, he died in 1936. His eldest son became king in 1936, and he was Edward VIII. Unfortunately for him, the British establishment decided that he couldn't become king because he wanted to marry a divorcee. God forbid. Within the Queen's lifetime, a king was not allowed to assume his role because he wanted to marry a divorcee. Who would have thought any such thing would have been applied in our lifetime? But for that reason, King Edward VIII abdicated in December 1936, and it's only then the Queen's father became king. So he was the second son of Edward VIII, of George V. But his name was actually Albert. George was not his first name. He was Albert Frederick Arthur George. So he chose one of his other names to become king, not King Arthur, which I think would have been great for the UK, but it became King George, and King George VI. And only then, when King George VI became king in 1936, did the Queen become the heir to the throne. So she was already 10 years old by this time, born in 1926. For the first 10 years of her life, she was not expecting to be queen. It was going to be the children of Edward VIII. Bear in mind that Edward VIII didn't die until 1972. The Queen's father, George VI, died in 1952. She became queen in 1952, was queen for 70 years. King George VIII died in 1972, but he died without children. So even if the Queen hadn't become queen in 1952, she still would have become queen in 1972. So it's funny how those things, those destinies, chase us all and become that. But even so, she lived that life, and she lived it to full as a queen, over all the turmoil and all the changes that have gone ahead since the 1930s, since the 19th century, to be the second great queen, Queen Victoria in the 19th century, and Queen Elizabeth in the 20th century. As a footnote, Charles's name is Charles Arthur George, so we still haven't got King Arthur because he's proclaimed himself as King Charles. The last chance we've got, realistically, is Charles's son is William Arthur, so he could be King Arthur. So UK could still get a King Arthur sometime soon. The Queen was married in 1947, and her husband, Prince Philip, who was a Greek royalty by birth, and so an expat to the UK, he died in 1921. So they were married for 74 years. So that's a great long time to be stable in marriage and to be, a queen of her country, doing her job dutifully all the way. We see this. ProACT's job is to protect family, property and business across border and down generations. So always looking at this, and it happens for us a lot that we see that people that have been married a long time, they can die about the same time. It's not absolutely true, but there is a medical condition known for it. Um, but we see it in magpies, maybe. But it's called broken heart syndrome, where maybe 30% of long-time married couples die around the same time or within a couple of years of each other. That could be because of um, the extra stress on the heart, the stress or the distress. It could be that the habits and lifestyle of all those 50, 60, 70 years together, just a breakdown of that fills them with despair. Or it could be the romantic wanting to be reunited with their beloved one that's died. But it does happen quite a lot, and because what we've got with the Queen is a well-planned succession where people are looking to live and work abroad, um, um, and the property, the succession is all done seamlessly, and this is what all families should be doing, and we encourage our clients to do this. Cross-border, there is marriages, there's property, there's legal constraints, and you need to consider those to manage your affairs going forward. The Queen lived to 96, Queen Victoria lived to 83. So it's not because of our times that you live a long time. Life expectancy, we're told, over the last 100 years has risen dramatically. But actually, half the world's population in 2022 are under 25, which is why we've got so much tumult and so much movement in the world, with people looking for new opportunities, new identities, new directions, new ways forward. Queen Victoria married an expat. She married a German. Queen Elizabeth married a Greek person. People move across border and relocate, and things change. What we do see, what the big thing in the last 100 years that medicine has done, has improved life expectancy. 100 years ago, life expectancy for under 20s, infant mortality was 50%. So you'd only got a 50% more chance in Queen Victoria's age of surviving to age 20. But if you did survive to age 20, there's a good chance you could live a long, full and happy life with yourself or with your married couple. So this is what happened with Victoria, Queen Victoria. That's what's happened with Queen Elizabeth, and it can happen to most of us. We can be unlucky, maybe, but that is the plan. And in fact, if you consider that it's estimated that there's around 500,000 people in the world at any time that are already over the age of 100. So the human body can live excessively to 100. There are other animals that live to maybe 100, 200, 300 years. There's plants and trees that live that long as well. There's some type of animals like jellyfish and bacteria that in theory have got an infinite lifespan. But for human beings, generally, 70, 80 years is possible as long as you survive childhood. And planning ahead for your succession, planning ahead for what comes next for your property and your affairs is an important thing. And thank goodness that Queen Elizabeth had the whole of the British establishment behind her to help her organise that. That Prince Charles got his training sessions with former prime ministers about how to behave as his king, and I'm sure he'd be a great king. All my life, Queen Elizabeth has only been the Queen of England, so change is a funny thing. But I respect the consistency, stability, and changes that have happened in the UK during her lifetime, and good for her. And her children now are retired age. They're all elderly people. It's the young people, the people of the future, and we need to look out and invest in them and take care of the future by planning ahead with our family and businesses. Queen Elizabeth did that well, and good for her, and thank you. And we shall toast and celebrate your life on Monday at your funeral, and best wishes to you and your family.